This is the start of a series on Raspberry Pi. In previous videos, I assembled some Raspberry Pis into Pi plates, and I also talked about formatting the SD cards. This video actually is the startup of discussing how to set up Raspberry Pi initially. And this will be the start of a series where I do some projects on Raspberry Pi. Hope you enjoy it. Hello everyone, Frank Lamb here from the Automation Academy, and you might recognize this view from where I start a lot of my webcasts, but I'm going to take you on a little tour here and bring you over to where I do my work on Raspberry Pi, because I'm going to continue the Raspberry Pi video and talk about configuration and startup of the Raspberry Pi. So a little bit of a look here. This is where I do a lot of my work, and this is a table where I teach people. And you can see here that I have my laptop here with a remote desktop into the other room, and this screen that you see here is the startup screen for Raspberry Pi. So I am remoted into the Raspberry Pi in the other room, and I'm going to take you here to the other room and show you a little bit about how I'm remoting. So this is my little lab area. So the last video that I made, I showed this, which is the case plate. And I built this case plate into a little box here, and then set it on this table, and of course connected it right up here to the screen. And I had to do a kind of a variety of things before being able to remote, and so I'm going to go through what some of those things are. First, a little bit about this lab. So I have set this up as a little electronics lab here. I have a kind of a variety of things in this area. Oscilloscope, a lot of organizational stuff here, some Pi stuff down on the bottom. And right here is the DIN plate. And I have put this into one of my little boxes here, kind of holding it with my knee. There we go. One of my little enclosures. I built this and put it on a piece of DIN rail. And so that's ready to connect up to. I can use the same kind of connections that I have here. You can see here a power connection and an HDMI connection. Here on the back, I've got my USB connections, which are my keyboard and my mouse, and then of course the HDMI connection is here, and this is a common splash screen that you would see on a Raspberry Pi. So I've got several Pis here, as I mentioned. This is a camera. I'm not going to be using this here, but I've had this connected up to Raspberry Pi. This is an infrared camera. Down here, if you watched my video on configuring cards, this is the third Pi, and this is a 3B, and I've got this set up on a breadboard, so I haven't built it into a case or anything. And then you can see that there's a meter in there, and I usually kind of keep that closed here. And when you first power up the Pi, you're going to get a splash screen that says that you need to set it up. It doesn't look quite like this. It just basically says you need to start setting some of these things here. It will tell you to set where you are. So then it will ask you to set your time zone. And the time zone's kind of interesting here because this list does not include towns necessarily close to you, and you can see a lot of the towns and things here are small towns, right? Like I'm not sure where Fort Nelson is, but anyway, Nashville is not here, which is where I am. So you'd set all that. You don't necessarily want to pick the closest town to you. I think the closest town to me is Louisville, but that's actually in a different time zone. So I chose Chicago, and then you hit OK. And it's also going to tell you to set a password. I believe the normal password is Raspberry or something like that, and you're going to want to change it and set a new password. And then the next thing that it's going to ask you to do is connect to Wi-Fi. And the reason that you want to do this is you want to download the latest files and get those on your computer. So once you've gone through all these different splash screens and everything, you'll be all set up. And then since you have your browser available, right, since you've set your Wi-Fi, the next thing you would want to do is, if you want a remote desktop like I am here, you would want to go and set up a VNC connection for virtual network connection. And to do that, you'll need to download some software, and I believe it's from Real VNC, and that's where I downloaded all this from. So you download the VNC server, and then it's going to make you log in again to install it. And then you would also have to go to your desktop, and you would also have to install it there. So you'd install it on your Pi, after which you will have a little icon like this, and you can open it up, and it will give you a IP address here. Since you're on your local network, right, it'll set it for you. And I will say, the first time I set this up for a different Pi, it set it up as 192.168.116, and this time it chose 192.168.117. So that's kind of interesting. And then you will need to go and install it also on your laptop. So these are the two connections that I have on my laptop, and the port that you want to use is 5900, and it will tell you that when you do your setup here. But then once you've done that and you double click on it, again, it will make you log in, and it will allow you to save the login credentials. Then you'll be able to connect remotely, which is what I've got here. I'm connected remotely. That's most of the setup, and you can see here there are a lot of different things that when I formatted the card, put the operating system on here, a lot of things got installed: Chromium web browser, Thonny Python, and there was another Scratch, and that doesn't seem to be on here. I don't see Scratch, but that's another programming software. So you would need to download whatever you think you're going to need. But that's just a little bit of a look at what it takes to connect up to your Pi, and then what you can do after that is you could disconnect the monitor in the other room, right, and you'd just be able to remote into the Pi and do all of your work from the remote desktop. So that's just a little look at how to do the initial setup of the Raspberry Pi, and hope you enjoyed it. I plan to continue this with some different projects and things. You may find this on YouTube, but the other videos in this series will be in the Automation Academy, and of course it's a paid membership site. So if you are interested, feel free to join. Thank you.